The snow fell heavy in the lands beyond the wall, the kind of snow that swallowed sound, buried trails, and made the world feel like it was holding its breath. Jon Snow trudged forward in silence, Ghost padding beside him. The White Wolf didn't look at him the same anymore. Not since that night. They had gone north, far past the remnants of Eastwatch and the shattered wall, deeper than any free folk dared to settle. This wasn't just exile. This was abandonment. Jon thought he'd find peace here, a place where no one called him king, where no one whispered about Daenerys or questioned his bloodline. But peace didn't live here, only cold and something else. He started hearing it 2 nights into their journey north. Whispers carried by the wind, like voices hidden in the snowflakes. Tormund said it was just the wind playing tricks, that the snow messes with the ears. Jon didn't argue, but deep down he knew it wasn't just wind. The voices weren't loud, but they felt directed, like someone speaking through a wall. Not words, exactly, but something deeper. Urges, questions, commands. That night, Jon had a dream. If it was a dream at all. He was standing on the frozen lake where the battle against the White Walkers had once raged. But this time, there was no fire, no dragons, no allies, just him and the Night King. Only the Night King looked different. He looked like Jon. Same face, same scar, same haunted eyes, except those eyes were glowing blue like the heart of winter. The icy version of himself raised a hand, and the ground cracked open beneath Jon's feet, swallowing him into darkness. He woke in a sweat, except he wasn't sweating. Frost clung to his beard. The inside of the tent had a thin layer of ice crawling up the fabric, and in his arms was something heavy. At first he thought it was Ghost, but no, it was a deer, a young one, frozen solid. Its eyes open and cloudy. Its body was stiff, its limbs twisted unnaturally. It had died recently, but there were no wounds, no signs of a struggle, just cold. And Jon's arms were wrapped around it like he had pulled it close in his sleep. Looked at his hands. No cuts, no blood, just pale skin colder than it should have been. The others in the camp were too tired to ask questions. The free folk had seen worse. But Tormund gave him a strange look that morning. Not fear, not yet, just suspicion, like something was off and he didn't know what. They moved on the next day, deeper still into the wilds. The sky never cleared. It was as if the sun had given up trying. Jon stayed quiet most of the time. Even when the others joked or argued, he kept his head down. There was a weight pressing on his chest that he couldn't shake, like guilt or sorrow, but sharper. That night, the whispers returned, louder now. He lay in the snow beside Ghost, staring up at the black sky. The voice inside him, if it could even be called that, wasn't cruel, it wasn't kind either. It was patient, as if it had waited a long time for this. You were chosen. He sat up, heart racing. No one was there. Ghost lifted his head but didn't move closer. His glowing, red eyes fixed on Jon with unease. The wolf had been loyal through everything, battlefields, betrayals, the coldest nights of Castle Black. But now there was distance between them, not space, but something deeper. Ghost could feel it. Something in Jon had shifted. Jon brushed his palm across the wolf's head. But Ghost flinched, stepping back. The rejection cut deeper than any sword. He lowered his hand slowly, staring into the frost-covered trees around them. The woods were still, but that didn't mean they were empty. 2 wildlings had gone missing that afternoon. They were scouts, good ones. Tormund had sent them to check the western ridge. They hadn't returned. No blood, no screams, just gone. I don't like this. Tormund had grunted that evening by the fire. This isn't normal. We've fought shadows before. John, but this feels worse. John hadn't responded, because he agreed. Deep in his gut he knew something ancient had awakened, and he feared it had something to do with him. He rose before dawn, walking away from the camp while the others still slept. The snow didn't crunch beneath his feet. It seemed to move out of his way. That alone should have scared him, but part of him wasn't surprised. It was as if the snow knew him now, recognized him. He reached a clearing, dead trees twisted like claws reaching up at the sky, and there, in the center, was a circle of untouched ice, smooth, clear, perfect, too perfect to be natural. He stepped closer. The whispers returned. Blood of fire, soul of snow, you were never theirs. His breath caught. The wind howled, and in the ice he saw faces, familiar ones. Ygritte, her smile full of fire. Sam, looking terrified. Arya, her eyes sharp with judgment. Daenerys, beautiful, tragic Daenerys, looking at him with pain and betrayal. He closed his eyes tight. "Stop," he whispered. The wind obeyed. For a moment there was silence, but the cold didn't leave. It sank deeper into his bones like it had claimed them. When he opened his eyes, something had changed. The ice wasn't just reflecting his face. It was showing a version of him crowned in frost, blue eyes glowing, expression empty. He stumbled back, heart pounding. "No," he whispered, "that's not me." But even as he said it, something deep inside disagreed. Later that night, as the group sat quietly around the fire, Tormund pulled Jon aside. "You ain't said 10 words in 2 days," Tormund said. "You're colder than the snow itself. And Ghost, he don't even trust you no more. Tell me true, Jon. Are you sick?" Jon wanted to tell him. He wanted to say it all. The whispers, the frost in his veins, the deer, the mirror of ice. But he couldn't, because if he said it out loud, it would be real. "I'm fine," he lied. Tormund narrowed his eyes. "You ain't, and I think you know it." That night, the wind returned, stronger now. It howled through the trees like a creature in mourning. Jon didn't sleep, and in the morning they found the missing wildlings, standing upright at the edge of the camp, frozen solid. Their eyes were cloudy, skin pale, but their bodies had no wounds, just stiff, dead silence, as if they had simply stopped living. The others recoiled in fear. Some screamed. Tormund cursed under his breath. But Jon, he couldn't look away, because in that moment, he knew, they were waiting for him, and part of him was starting to want to join them. They buried the frozen men under a pile of rocks and snow. No one spoke much during it. The air was too thick with fear, not the kind of fear you scream about, the kind that sits in your bones, quiet and heavy, like something waiting to break loose. Jon stood off to the side, eyes locked on the pale, unblinking faces of the men he couldn't save. Or maybe he didn't want to save them. That thought hit him like a slap, and he shook it away. That's not me. That's not who I am. But the cold didn't care. Ghost still kept his distance. Eyes, watching him like he was something else entirely. Like he was prey, or worse, a stranger. Tormund had tried to keep the group steady, making jokes, yelling orders, pretending everything was normal, but no one was buying it anymore. A few of the free folk had whispered about the curse, how the long-dead magic was returning. One old woman even claimed she'd seen Jon's breath freeze mid-air while he wasn't breathing. Jon didn't argue. How could he? He'd stopped feeling hunger. He hadn't blinked in hours. And every time someone touched him, they flinched. His skin was like stone left out in a snowstorm. That night he moved away from the camp again, walking without direction. His body didn't tire anymore. His feet didn't ache. It was as if the cold had numbed everything. But his mind, that, was still awake, and full of noise. The whispering hadn't stopped. In fact, it had grown more familiar. It didn't feel like something outside him anymore. It felt like something buried deep, climbing its way out. It spoke in ancient echoes, but John understood. It like he'd always known the language but forgotten it. You are not the first, but you are the strongest. He reached a grove of dead trees, their trunks blackened by frostbite. In the middle of them stood a creature, not a white walker, not yet. It looked like a man, but it moved wrong, like its joints didn't remember how to bend. It didn't attack. It just stared at him, head tilted. John stepped closer, hand on Longclaw. "Who are you?" The thing opened its mouth and the wind howled, but its lips didn't move. Instead, the answer came from within John. "I was once what you are, until the cold took me." He gasped, stumbling back, but the creature didn't follow. It only watched as he turned and ran back toward the camp. Back in camp, people noticed his absence. Tormund was waiting for him, arms crossed. "You're hiding something," he said. John didn't answer. "You need to tell me what's going on. People are scared. They're starting to look at you like the danger. And I gotta be honest, John, I'm starting to wonder myself." John sat down by the fire. He didn't feel its warmth. Not even a flicker. "I think something passed into me," he said finally. "When I killed the Night King, something didn't die, it just changed." Tormund stared at him like he wanted to laugh but couldn't find the humor. "So what? You're saying you're cursed? You think he's inside you?" "I don't know. I just know I'm changing. My body doesn't feel like mine. I don't feel anything anymore. Not hunger, not warmth. And the cold. It listens to me." Tormund leaned in. "And you waited this long to say something?" I didn't want to believe it. The old wildling looked away, his jaw clenched. "You should have stayed dead," he muttered under his breath. John heard it, but he didn't argue. He wasn't sure Tormund was wrong. The next day the storms came. Not a normal blizzard. This one moved like it had purpose. The wind circled their camp like a predator. Snow slammed down so hard it was blinding. They couldn't see 2 feet ahead. Tents collapsed. Horses panicked. And worst of all, something moved within the storm. Figures, dozens of them. Silhouettes of things that weren't quite alive. John stepped into the heart of it, Longclaw in hand, but deep down he already knew. They weren't coming for war, they were coming for him, and they obeyed. One of the free folks screamed as an ice wight lunged at him, but John raised a hand instinctively, and the creature stopped mid-air, like it had hit an invisible wall. Everyone froze. The wight dropped to its knees, and then, like a ripple, all the others did too. The camp fell into dead silence. John turned slowly, and what he saw in the eyes of the men and women around him, it wasn't just fear, it was recognition. They didn't see Jon Snow anymore. They saw the thing that had once marched to destroy the world. They didn't sleep that night, not one of them. The storm passed, but the silence it left behind was worse. No one moved. No one dared speak. The whites, if they were still whites, stood in a ring around the camp, motionless, heads bowed toward Jon, like guards or servants. Tormund paced with his axe in hand, stopping now and then just to look at Jon, not speak, just look, like he was trying to figure out whether to beg him for mercy or put steel through his heart. Jon sat by the dying fire, staring at his hand. He hadn't meant to stop the white. He didn't even know what he'd done. He just lifted his hand and willed it, and they obeyed, not like puppets, not like slaves, like they recognized him. One of the free folk, a quiet old man with no teeth, approached him near dawn. He had lived through the first long night. He had lost everything to the dead. And yet he knelt in front of Jon, placed a frost-bitten hand over his own chest and said in a cracked voice, "You've come back different, but I know what you are. You're the Winter King now, and maybe that ain't such a bad thing." Jon pulled back. "I'm not your king. I'm not anyone's king." But the man just smiled. "The cold doesn't take just anyone. It chooses." By morning, others followed. Not many, but enough. They brought offerings, wooden carvings, bones, little pieces of food they couldn't afford to give. They didn't speak to Jon. They just knelt in the snow and left their tributes. Tormund watched it all in stunned silence, then stormed off into the woods, muttering curses about fools worshipping death. Jon didn't stop them. He didn't ask for this. But the truth was, he wasn't sure if he could stop it even if he tried. And worse, he wasn't sure if he wanted to. The change kept creeping in. His dreams were no longer his. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the past, but not his past. Memories not from Castle Black or Winterfell. These were older, deeper, buried in snow and blood. He saw a young first man, tied to a weirwood tree, screaming as children of the forest drove dragon glass into his chest. The pain was unbearable, but the transformation afterward was worse. Bones freezing, heart slowing, memories erased. Then another vision, a man in dark robes crowned in ice, raising the dead with a flick of his fingers as the world burned, the Night Kings before him. He wasn't just cursed. He was connected. Every version of the Night King that had existed since the first. Jon could feel them now, hear them, like they were pieces of a frozen puzzle, and he was the final shape. The last one. The one who would either end it or begin it all again. The worst part. They weren't all evil. Some were broken. Some were forced. Others were like him, once heroes, once protectors. But something had twisted them, and now that same frost was crawling through his own soul. A week later, it happened. A young wildling girl, no older than 10, fell sick, feverish, shaking, coughing blood. She'd been weak since they crossed the icy river, but now she was fading fast. Her mother wailed, clutching the girl close, begging for help. There was nothing anyone could do, no healers, no potions, just snow. Jon stood nearby, staring at the child. He felt a pull, familiar, cold, and ancient. He moved forward slowly, every eye in the camp watching. The mother screamed when he knelt, shielding her daughter. "Get back, don't touch her." Jon paused. "I'm not here to hurt her." But even he didn't believe that. Not fully. Still, she moved aside, broken. By desperation, Jon laid a hand on the girl's forehead. She was already slipping away, barely breathing, her skin clammy and cold. He closed his eyes. Something inside him shifted, and then the cold left him, poured through his hand and into her. For a moment, the air went still. The fire nearby died out, its embers hissing in the snow. Then the girl sat up, gasping, alive, or something like it. Her eyes were pale, her breath misted like the dead. But she lived. She smiled at her mother, though her skin had lost all its color. The camp exploded into noise. Some screamed in joy, others in horror. Jon backed away, his hand trembling. He looked at his fingers, then at the girl. He hadn't healed her, he'd changed her. She was no longer dying, but she was no longer entirely alive either, and the others knew it. Tormund confronted him that night. "This has to stop," he growled. "You don't even see what's happening, do you? They're kneeling to you. They're calling you king. You're raising the dead. You think this ends with just one little girl?" Jon didn't answer. Tormund stepped closer, his voice shaking. "I fought beside you. I saw you kill that thing. I saw you die. But this is worse than death. You're not Jon Snow anymore. I never was, John said quietly. Not really. Tormund stared at him, eyes full of betrayal. Then he turned and walked into the darkness without another word. John didn't stop him. The cold wouldn't let him. In King's Landing, the crows brought more than news. They brought warnings. Bran sat in silence at the edge of the Red Keep's garden, eyes white, lost in vision. Ravens circled above, restless and loud. The snow falling in the north was heavier than it should have been for this time of year. Unnatural, relentless, devouring whole forests in days. Beside him, Maester Vulcan waited patiently with a trembling hand holding parchment. The scroll in his grasp came from a small free folk tribe that had once traded with the north. It told of ghost men, a girl brought back to life with cold in her veins, and Jon Snow, king of the wilds, commander of the dead. Bran's eyes fluttered back to normal, but his face had gone pale. "He's not dead," Bran whispered, barely audible. The maester frowned. "You mean Jon Snow? He's not who he was. Not anymore." Bran stood slowly, leaning heavily on the armrest of his chair. "He carries the memory of the one I saw fall at the Battle of Winter, the Night King's spirit. It wasn't destroyed. It moved to Jon Snow." Bran nodded. "I shouldn't have sent him north. I thought exile was mercy, but I sent him straight into the curse." Far away in Storm's End, Arya Stark slammed her hand on the war table. "I told you we should have brought him back," she snapped at Gendry. "I told you this wasn't over." Gendry leaned over the table, trying to keep calm. "You think I wanted him gone? He killed Daenerys. He didn't have a choice. And Bran said—" "Bran doesn't see everything," Arya cut in. "Not. All futures are fixed." She turned, pacing, eyes stormy. "I had a dream last night. I saw Jon standing on a frozen battlefield. There were bodies everywhere. Arya Me was among them." Gendry stiffened. "You saw your own death." "No," she said. "I saw my brother look through me like I wasn't even there." She left that night, sword on her hip, eyes sharper than ever. The journey north was brutal. The snow grew deeper with every mile, turning roads into graveyards of bone and ice. Villages once full of warmth and harvest were now abandoned. Frozen dogs, still tied to posts. Doors left wide open, no sign of struggle, just cold. All-consuming cold. Arya's men, a group of 6 seasoned scouts, began to crack. One by one, they whispered things at night. Of voices in the wind, of things. Watching from the trees, 3 of them vanished without a trace. The others begged to turn back, but Arya didn't. She never had. On the 12th day, she found the village of High Holt. It had been a thriving wildling settlement the last time she'd passed it, full of children and noisy traders. Now it was silent. Snow fell like ash. The houses were intact, but every person inside had been frozen mid-motion. A woman by a loom, her fingers stiff. A man at a hearth, stuck reaching for his child. The baby was still in the crib, blue-lipped, unmoving. Arya's breath misted as she walked through the stillness, heart hammering. This wasn't an attack. It was a message. She found Jon 2 days later. He stood at the top of a ridge, watching a silent glacier split itself open in the distance. No blade, no storm, just his presence, and the ice obeying him like a servant. She froze when she saw his back. He wore no armor, no cloak, just black leathers and frost-lined boots. His hair was tied back, and his skin, what little she could see of it, was pale. As snow, too pale to be natural. "Jon," she called out. He turned slowly. His face was the same, almost, but not quite. His eyes had a faded quality to them, like the warmth had been drained out and replaced with endless winter. They weren't glowing blue, not yet, but they were close. "Arya," he said softly, "you shouldn't have come." I came to bring you back." He looked down at the frozen wilderness below. "There's no going back, not for me." She stepped forward, hand near her blade. "You think I'll just accept that?" "No," he said. "I didn't expect you to. You always were stubborn." Arya studied him. "What happened to you?" He didn't answer right away. "I killed him," Jon finally said. "The Night King. But he didn't die. He entered me. Not like a spirit, not like a ghost, like a second skin. And every day since I've been disappearing under it." "You can fight it." Jon shook his head. "I did, for weeks. But he's not just a curse. He's a part of me now. And maybe he always was." Arya's jaw clenched. "That's not you talking." He looked at her and something flickered in his eyes. "What if it is?" There was a long silence. The wind howled behind them, swirling the snow. "Don't come any closer," Jon said, voice quieter now. "I can't control it around people I love." Arya ignored him and stepped forward. "I killed a god once," she said. "I can do it. Again." For a moment he smiled, a flicker of the real Jon, but just as fast it was gone. "Arya," he said softly, "if you have to stop me, don't hesitate." She stood still, eyes narrowing. "Then I won't." The days blurred after Arya's arrival. She stayed close, never more than a ridge or a snowbank away, watching Jon like a hawk watches a dying animal, waiting to see if it fights or succumbs. He didn't sleep anymore. Not really. He wandered. Instead, often standing still for hours at a time, staring into the distance like he saw things no one else could. Sometimes he spoke aloud, not to her, not to Ghost, who lingered far beyond the camp's edge now, silent and wary. He spoke to them, the voices. Arya caught snippets at night, crouched near the dying fire, her breath hanging in the air. Words in languages she didn't recognize, names, long buried. Once she heard him whisper a phrase that chilled her blood. "He failed, but I will not." When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. "I'm not alone in here," he said, tapping his head. "There are others, memories, spirits. I don't know what to call them, but they're all me." Arya sat across from him, hand near her dagger. "You're not one of them. You're Jon Snow. You're my brother." He looked at her, and for a flicker of a moment his eyes softened. Then came the cold again. "A part of me still is," he said, "but the rest, it's unraveling." The worst part was how natural it all felt to him now. He didn't shiver anymore. The cold bent around him like it feared him. And the creatures in the woods, wolves, owls, even bears, watched him with still reverence, like they were answering to something ancient. He had become a beacon, not of light, of memory. The Night Kings before him weren't just haunting him, they were teaching him, sharing pieces of themselves, how to raise without touch, how to twist air into frost, how to summon blizzards with a whisper. Each gift came with a price. Each time he used one, something inside him faded. A memory of Winterfell, the sound of Sam's laughter, the softness of Ygritte's voice. He was trading love for power, and he was beginning to forget the difference. Arya refused to give up. Each day she challenged him with questions, memories, jokes, anything to draw the human back out. "Remember when we found that kitten in the Godswood, and Sansa screamed till father came running?" she said one night, her voice tight. Jon blinked slowly. "A kitten?" Arya felt the crack in her heart. "You held it for hours, called it Snowball." He stared at her blankly. "I don't remember that." "You do," she said. "You have to." But he only looked away. And the wind picked up again. That night she dreamt of Jon standing in Winterfell's great hall, dressed in black and blue, his eyes glowing with frost. He sat on a throne made of shattered swords and ice. Bran knelt beside him, unmoving. Sansa and Gendry stood frozen at the edges, like statues. In the dream, Jon turned to Arya, smiled and said, "You should have run when you had the chance." She woke up sweating, but the air was still cold. Jon, meanwhile, was walking through the woods, barefoot, his skin glowing faintly in the dark. He wasn't sleepwalking. He wasn't sleeping at all. The memories were coming faster now, sharper. Visions of the first long night flooded his mind. Villages burning, skies blackened, the children of the forest crying as the creation they had birthed lost all control. He saw himself standing in the middle of it, arms stretched, commanding death. Like a choir. It wasn't just a memory, it was a warning, but he wasn't sure if it was warning him or warning the world about him. Arya found him that morning, standing in front of a weirwood tree. Its face had blackened, veins of frost climbing up its trunk. "You killed it," she said, shocked. Jon didn't turn. "It screamed," he whispered. "When I touched it, it screamed. The gods know." Arya stepped closer, her boots crunching over frost. "Then fight it, fight what's inside you." Jon finally turned to her, his face pale and distant. "I did, every day, but I think I was meant for this. The first Night King was made, forced, but maybe I was born for it." Arya's voice cracked. "That's not true." Jon stepped forward, and the temperature dropped around them. Ice crawled over nearby stones. The trees bent under invisible pressure. "Every step I take north, the world gets colder. It obeys me. It follows me. I didn't choose this. But now I see this is the cost of killing death. You become it." Arya unsheathed her blade. Jon raised a hand, and the trees stopped moving. In that moment she saw it. Not Jon, not the Night King, but something new. A hybrid, a weapon of old blood, ice and broken oaths. Jon Snow was fading, and what replaced him wanted to walk south. The night sky above the frozen forest was darker than usual. No stars, no moon, just an ocean of black, thick as tar. Arya sat near the edge of their camp, her breath curling out in short, angry clouds. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. Not when every second Jon spent alive meant more ice creeping into the world. He was further out tonight, wandering again. She'd tried to follow, but it was no use. He moved like the wind now, silent, drifting, untouchable. Nearby, the girl Jon had saved was still awake. She didn't blink. She didn't speak, just sat there, staring at nothing, rocking slightly. Her mother had stopped looking her in the eyes. It was like something had returned from the dead but left its soul behind. Arya clenched her fists. This wasn't her brother. This was something else. Far to the south, Bran Stark sat alone in the godswood of King's Landing. His eyes rolled white as he flew far beyond his crippled body. The ravens screamed in the trees above him as his spirit soared past the wall, past the glaciers, past the bones of the old world. And then he found him. Jon stood alone in a clearing, surrounded by falling snow that refused to touch his skin. 1,000 silent wights stood beyond the trees, waiting, like frozen statues. Bran's voice didn't carry through speech. It came as thought, whispered through the roots of the earth. The old magic. Jon. Jon turned his head slightly, as if he felt the shift in the air. "You're still in there. You must fight it." "I've been fighting," Jon said aloud, though no one was around. "But it's not just inside me anymore. It's becoming me." "You are more than this curse." "No," Jon whispered, closing his eyes. "I'm not. You knew what would happen when you sent me north." Bran didn't respond, not directly. He only showed Jon a vision of the past, of a young boy in the crypts of Winterfell, lighting a candle and whispering to statues, of Ghost curled up beside him. Of a night spent talking with Sam beneath the stars, speaking of honor, love, and fear. John fell to his knees. "I remember," he breathed. "But it's fading. I can't hold it. Every time I remember who I was, something inside me freezes it." "Then let me take it from you." John looked up. "What?" "I can't save you, but I can take the part that's still human and keep it safe." John understood. This wasn't rescue, it was goodbye. Later, Arya found him kneeling beneath the blackened weirwood, eyes closed. Snow gathered in his hair, but he didn't brush it away. He looked calm, eerily calm. She stepped forward cautiously. "What did you see?" He opened his eyes. They weren't glowing blue, not yet. But the warmth that once lived there was gone, locked away somewhere far out of reach. "Bran," he said softly. "He came to say farewell." Arya didn't speak. "I gave him what was left of me," John continued. "The memories, the guilt, the part of me that was still fighting. I gave it all away." "Why?" she demanded. "So you can become this." "Because I have no choice." "There's always a choice," Arya hissed. John looked at her with sadness. "Not when the thing inside you wants the world to burn in ice, and not when the world has stopped wanting you back." Arya pulled her dagger. Valyrian steel. The same one she used to kill the first Night King. It gleamed faintly in the dim light. He didn't flinch. "You know what this blade can do," she said. "Yes. If I strike you now, you might kill me," John said, "or you might kill whatever's left of the man you once called brother." Her hand trembled. "Then tell me what to do, John." He stood slowly. "You wait. One more night. Tomorrow I walk south." She froze. "Why?" "Because I can feel the wall. I can feel it weakening. I didn't just inherit the Night King's curse, Arya. I inherited his purpose. To destroy the world? No," John said, his voice low. "To punish it." That night, the temperature dropped lower than ever before. Arya lay awake with her dagger clutched tight, eyes never leaving the place where John rested. He didn't move, barely even breathed. The wind whispered again, but now it spoke his name. "John, John, John." In the dream world, Bran sat beneath the heart tree, the last of John's memories playing before him like a dying fire. He watched John and Robb sparring in the yard. He saw John petting Ghost for the first time. He saw John kiss Ygritte in the cave, whispering, "I don't ever want to leave this place." And then he saw the fire go out. Bran cried, not because John was gone, but because the man the world needed most had been twisted into something it could never love again. The next morning, John stood at the edge of the mountain ridge, his eyes fixed south. The wind bent around him like it carried his command. The wall far in the distance creaked. Cracks began to spread, and from the woods behind him, 1,000 dead things waited for his signal. Arya stood behind him, breath shallow. She knew now. There was no saving Jon Snow, only stopping him, or dying with him. The sky bled white as dawn broke over the ridge, but there was no warmth in the light. The snow sparkled like shattered glass, and the wind carried silence, the kind that comes before a storm or a massacre. Arya stood at the head of a small band of survivors, what remained of her scouts, a few free folk who'd refused to kneel. And Gendry, bruised, frostbitten but unshakable, they weren't an army. They were barely a squad, but they had one thing left. Resolve. Arya's fingers curled around the hilt of her dagger. Behind the ridge, Jon's army stood waiting, silent and perfectly still. 1,000 corpses, newly dead, barely rotting. Men. Giants, direwolves, creatures twisted by frost, eyes glowing with hollow blue. Not one of them breathed, and at the center, Jon, cloaked in black and silver, skin pale as bone, his eyes now fully changed, icy lanterns in a face once full of life. The crown of frost around his temples shimmered with shards of ancient magic. The Night King reborn. No, not reborn, chosen. The wall cracked again, not shattered, not yet. But the sound echoed across the ice fields like a war drum. Arya stepped forward alone, dagger in hand, not raised. "Not yet, Jon!" she shouted over the wind. "Don't do this!" The dead didn't move, but Jon did. He walked forward, slow and steady, boots leaving no prints in the snow. He stopped 10 paces from her, close enough that she could see the outline of the old Jon in his eyes, buried under layers of something inhuman. "It's already done," he said quietly. "It doesn't have to be." He shook his head. "Every king thinks they can choose their fate. I thought that once. But this isn't about choice. This is the balance coming back." "Balance," she snapped. "You want to destroy the world. You think that's balance." Jon looked past her. "Fire brought too much. Dragons, war, madness. Ice is the correction. You're not a correction," Arya said coldly. "You're broken." He gave a faint, tragic smile. "Then end me." Her dagger flicked up, and she lunged. Steel met. Silence. Arya moved fast. Faster than any living soul. But Jon didn't flinch. His hand rose calmly, and as she struck, the wind itself knocked her sideways. She tumbled across the snow like a rag doll, crashing into a frozen tree. She groaned, pulling herself up, but he didn't follow. He stood still, watching her like a god watching a fire ant struggle. She tried again. A blur in the snow, blade glinting. In sunlight, this time she reached him. The dagger stabbed deep, right into his chest. Jon staggered back, eyes wide. Arya gasped. Hope flared. But then the dagger cracked. A spiderweb of frost exploded across the blade, and it shattered in her. And like fragile ice. "No," she whispered. Jon looked down at the hole in his chest. No blood, just a glow. Faint blue light pulsed within like a dying star. "You tried," he said almost kindly. "You really tried." Then the dead marched. The battle was chaos. The cold moved with will. The dead fought like shadows. Fast, tireless, precise. Gendry swung his hammer until his arms bled. The free folk screamed curses into the blizzard, hacking with axes and clubs. Arrows shattered mid-air from the chill. Steel rang, bones cracked, flesh tore, but they were losing. All of them. Arya ducked, rolled, stabbed. She moved like a ghost herself, killing 3 whites in the time it took others to breathe once. But it didn't matter. For every one that fell, 3 more rose. She saw Gendry fall, his leg caught by the jaw of an undead bear. He screamed her name before disappearing under the snow. Arya turned, blade drawn, but the bear never reached her. It stopped, frozen mid-leap, because Jon had raised a hand and his eyes were on her again. He walked toward her, parting his army like, "Water, I didn't want this," he said. "You chose this," she spat, chest heaving. "I chose to spare you. I told you to run. And leave you like this?" Jon looked tired, deeply, eternally tired. "I remember things, Arya. I remember everything, every life the Night Kings have taken. I remember their reasons, their pain. You think I want to bring death to the world? I want to stop it before it can destroy itself again. I want silence, peace. This is mercy. Don't you dare call this mercy." Arya's hands trembled with rage. "You want to burn the world in frost. You're no better than her." That stopped him. Her. Daenerys. Shadow crossed his face, and for a second, just one fragile second, Jon blinked. His breath hitched. "You loved her," Arya whispered, "and now you're becoming what she was. A tyrant who believes destruction is salvation." His hands dropped slightly. "I'm sorry," he said. She surged forward again. "No blade this. And time, just her bare fists, but before she could reach him, the snow beneath her feet exploded. The cold itself threw her back, her body slamming into stone, breath knocked out of her. Darkness began to swallow her vision. She saw John's boots, walking away slowly into the storm. The last thing she heard was the wall breaking. The wall fell with the sound of the sky breaking. Cracks spidered through its ancient mass like veins of fate, glowing faint blue. Then, with a final groan, old, tired and inevitable, it shattered. The northern edge collapsed, burst, crashing down in frozen thunder. Entire segments buckled, then broke like rotten teeth. Ice sprayed miles across the land, burying forests, rivers, and the last remaining watchtowers. From the south, they saw it, a white storm rising. Not clouds, not snow, but the dead. Arya awoke in a cave of frost, her head pounding, ribs aching. She wasn't sure how long she'd been unconscious, but the cold gnawed at her, sharper than hunger. The battlefield above was silent now. She stumbled into the open, coughing blood, her dagger still broken at her side. Bodies lay frozen, mid-fight. Some slumped in prayer, some with weapons still raised. None moved. She searched the field until she found Gendry. He lay face down in the snow, his hand still clenched tight around the haft of his hammer. She turned him gently. There was no warmth left, no breath. Arya didn't cry. Not yet. Not here. The grief would come later. If there was a later. The southern kingdoms stirred. In Winterfell, the ravens screamed from the maester's tower. Bran sat in his chair, his eyes pale and blank as his mind stretched north and saw the end walking toward them. "He's through," Bran whispered. "He broke the wall." Sansa stared at him in horror. "What do we do?" "We remember," Bran said, "and we prepare." Tyrion, now Hand of the King in name, but war general in spirit, turned to the room of stunned nobles. "Evacuate every village north of the Neck. Send word to the Vale, the Reach, Dawn, every living house. If we fall alone, we fall forever." "But who leads the defense?" someone asked. A raven landed on the windowsill, and Bran whispered, "Arya will." Arya travelled south on foot, moving with the ghost of a shadow. No army at her back, no allies at her side. Just snow, silence, and memory. She passed villages where frost crawled up the walls like ivy. Entire families lay in bed, arms around each other, frozen mid-sleep. Others never made it that far, caravans trapped in the road, eyes wide with horror, as the cold claimed them. But she was immune to fear now. She had seen him. She had felt what he had become. Jon Snow was gone. Whatever wore his face now was older than kings, crueler than fire and colder than death, and it remembered. Far in the north, Jon stood atop the remains of the wall, surrounded by silence. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He didn't need to anymore. Below him, the dead stretched endlessly in all directions. Thousands, tens of thousands. More by the hour, and behind them the storm. A blizzard so vast it swallowed the sun. It wasn't weather, it was him. The ice crown around his head pulsed faintly, alive with ancient runes. The markings of the first Night King, the second, the third, and now the last. Jon wasn't human anymore. He was memory incarnate, the North's final curse. The echo of 1,000 winters. He raised his hand, and the army marched. In the deep places of the world, the old gods stirred. The last weirwood screamed in the dark, their leaves wilting from frost. Magic itself recoiled. Dragons went silent. The red priests fell to their knees, unable to find the flame, and the people began to pray not for victory, but for mercy. Arya reached Winterfell 2 weeks later, her eyes sunken, her heart heavy. She was thinner, colder, but she had survived. And she had one message. "He's not the Night King," she told them, standing in the great hall. "He's something worse. He remembers who he was. That's what makes him dangerous. He knows our weaknesses, our hopes, our faces. He remembers us." Bran nodded slowly. He remembers being loved. And now he'll burn that memory from the world. Far to the north, the thing that had been Jon, stood in the ruins of Castle Black. The snow fell endlessly, wrapping the old stones in layers of silence. He stepped into the Lord Commander's chambers, and there, still hanging on the wall, was the cloak he had once worn. He reached for it. Fingertips brushed the wool, and for just a second, just a breath, Jon Snow returned, a flicker, a memory. He saw Sam laughing over a book. He saw Ghost curled up beside the fire. He saw Arya smiling with a sword in her hand. He blinked. Then the cold roared back. He dropped the cloak, turned and walked away. The north would fall within the month. The Riverlands in 2. King's Landing would see the sky turn white before the bells ever rang. And the last story written in the Citadel before the ink froze, solid, read simply, "His crown was made of ice, but his soul was made of silence." Jon Snow had saved the world once. Now he would bury it. The end.